So we're here today to talk about Chinese dietetics and the fourth season. So we're going to explore how do we start to look at eating right with our seasons. I'm going to take a minute to introduce us. So I want to introduce to you my very good friend and also colleague, Dr. Kay Park. Dr. Park was born and raised in Seoul, South Korea. Her family is in Oriental medicine. So as a young child, she learned how to do cupping therapy from her father, who was a doctor of acupuncture and oriental medicine. And she also learned how to make medicinal food from her mother, who was a restaurant owner and chef. She got her first degree, her bachelor's in psychology and education, but she had that drive to pull to be a traditional Chinese medical doctor. From there, she did her master's at Bastyr University here in Seattle, Washington. But the call to go back to Seoul, to go back to Korea to study was really important to her. And in there, she went and she started to study dietetics as well as work in the field of depression and anxiety. And shortly after that, she moved back, started her practice here in the Seattle area. And she finalized both her PhD at the ZCMU University, as well as her DAOM with Five Branches University. She really enjoys the field of dietetics because she feels that food can be used as medicine. And like I said earlier, I am Dr. Robin Saunders. I first started in the world of traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, nearly 20 years ago. It feels like only 2 or 3 because it's such a fantastic field. Currently, I'm the Dean of the DAOM program at Five Branches University. And I've been interested in dietetics and just really utilizing food as a way to heal ourselves and work within both our local cuisines and regional foods as well as the seasons and really see how that effect is on our bodies. When we begin to incorporate these types of modalities or these types of thought processes, it really brings that ownership and ability for our patients and ourselves and our friends and our families to just be in charge of their own health. So I am going to turn it back over to Dr. Kay, and she is going to give you an overview of what Chinese medicine dietetics is.
Hello, this is Dr. K. Park here. I am so pleased to present this lecture with Dr. Robin. Both Dr. Robin and I are so passionate about food, and we truly believe in the healing power of a TCM nutrition. So, here I am going to have a brief overview of eating with the seasons and the principles and philosophies behind it. In today's world, it is so easy to transport food long distances that we take it for granted that we can eat fresh berries in cold winter or have an avocado toast every day. However, many of us have no clue when fruits and veggies are actually in season where we live. As little as 100 years ago, most people knew the best time to pick blueberries or which vegetables would grow best in their area and when. Now, our modern lifestyle of a convenience has caused us to lose touch with these basic ideas. So, seasonal food refers to the times of the year when the harvest or the flavor of a given type of food is at its peak. With that said, eating with the seasons is better for your health, tastes better, better for the environment, and it is cheaper. TCM draws endless wisdom from nature and its natural laws. Therefore, seasonal eating plays a huge role in TCM nutrition. Seasonal eating is more than just the eating in season fresh produce. According to TCM, all foods have own energetic properties, which refers to qi and wei. There are thermal nature, flavors, qi movement, and meridian affiliation. There are 5 thermal natures, just like a weather forecast, which are cold, cool, neutral, warm, and hot. For example, watermelon is cold, cucumber is cool, potato is neutral, beef is warm, and chili is hot. There are 5 flavors, which is the concept closely related to 5 element theory. Each food is associated with a flavor, which implies a certain functions. So sweet to tonify, acrid to disperse, salty to cool, sour to preserve, bitter to dry and cool down. There are the qi movement, as food can influence how qi moves throughout our body. And the movement of a qi will then influence how we feel and how our organs function. Qi can move upwards, downwards, inwards, and outwards. And there is a meridian affiliations. For example, the entry meridians of a peppermint are lung and liver, as it relieves nasal allergies and headaches due to tensions caused by stress. So, understanding relationship between food colors, flavors, and corresponding body system, and the 5-element creation controlling cycle can also be very helpful to maximize the TCM nutrition benefit. And we have this diagram of a 5 element, which are wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and its corresponding organs, color, flavors, and seasons. For example, the wood, the color is green, the season is spring, corresponding organs are liver and gallbladder, associated flavor is sour. The examples of food is a young plant, fresh greens, sprouts, and lots of upward growing vegetables. And I want to point that out, though, we have to keep in mind that where you live makes a difference in what's available during each season, but this can give you a general idea. So we are going to get more into each season, and I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Robin.
Thank you, Dr. K. I'm going to go ahead and talk about spring. So what is spring? Spring comes and follows right after winter, and it's a time when the world starts to wake up and return. And you can experience that when you walk outside. You feel the fresher air, the little bit of warmth coming in. We look down, and it's when flowers start to open up, they spring forth, they begin to peek up from the grounds. The birds start coming back. You see that the insects are starting to scurry, starting to scatter, starting to stir, kind of start to wake up. The world just starts to begin to feel fresher. The leaves on the trees and the buds are starting to come forth. And so the chi that's associated with spring is often about expansion and growth. And we feel that within ourselves as well when we want to get out and get moving. We want to get this feeling of movement within ourselves. And so with expansion and growth, we get that in our mindset as well. What is our new projects? It's when people take on projects around their house. Maybe they're like, ooh, I'm going to plant a garden, all this new stuff. As I was saying, if you look down at the bottom there, you can see that the chi is returning to the surface. And what does that mean? It means it's coming up a little bit more, starting to poke its head out. Like I was saying, we see that with the really good ways where if you plant flowers, you start to see it with the flowers. In our patients or within people, we also start to see the pulse come up a little bit. We start to see that pulse float up a little bit closer to the surface. So it's coming away from, or trying to come away from, that deeper settling that happened during the winter. The spring is also associated with liver, which is that springing forth, upright movement, the chi movement that goes with that. And so we see a lot of livery type of things. And so when we're looking into dietetics or food, what we want to see is we want to see what tastes go with the spring. And so in the spring, we're coming off from that winter, that hibernation. We want to increase the sweets a little bit and increase the pungent and decrease the sour. Now, why would that be important? The sweet taste has an action of tonifying and harmonizing. It also decelerates the chi just a little bit. That's why we say just a little bit of sweets, so that you still have that chi movement, but the sweets are going to rein it in. while still nourishing it as it starts to do these growth. Growth has to come from nourishment. And so we want to add some sweet into it. We want to bring the pungent in because pungent helps to disperse things, helps to move that qi, helps to invigorate and promote the circulation. During the winter, when we're a little bit stagnant, our qi isn't moving as well. And so we really want to also use this pungent flavor to move the detoxifying and get this, all the ick that we don't want in, moved out. When we're looking at the temperature, the actual physical temperature and the temperature of the foods, both like how we prepare them, but also the food property itself, we want it to be slightly cool foods, not too hot and not too cold. Too hot is going to move things too fast. Too cold is going to pull it in too much and make the cheese slow down. So we want it like at that room temperature, slightly cool, not too much or not too less. We also want to look towards some green foods, which associates with the liver, but also foods that would be detoxifying. This is because, again, the liver has sat through the winter and we want to move things out that are no longer important. We're also looking at lighter foods. Again, promoting that qi movement. It's just waking up, so we want to get that moving. We also want to have less oils, less fried food, less heavy foods. Again, we don't want to push down on that qi. We want to keep that ability to move. What foods can you enjoy in the spring? One of the things we look at is onions and leeks. Onions and leeks have that pungent flavor. You know, when we cut them, we start to cry a little bit. It also has a lot of properties that are antibacterial, antiviral. And again, spring is when we start to come out. We associate with people. There might be some new viruses. So the onions and leeks protect us on that manner, but it also helps to move the qi to the surface, which helps with the wei qi with that. When we're looking at vegetables, again, going with those green leafy vegetables, which help to detoxify our body. The green associates with liver, cucumbers and celery, and mushrooms, and cucumber and celery are also slightly cooling to the body. You want yams, which bring in a little bit of the sweetness. When we look at the fruits, you can see it's really interesting. They're all are very sweet fruits, but they're also a little bit damp. That's because this can also, time can be very drying to your lungs. So think about things like seasonal allergies, things along that lines. And so pears are specifically good to support the lung function. Dates are going to help that spleen start to work a little bit better coming off from maybe a fast over the winter. Your grains are still light. We've got the wheat bran and spelt, brown rice and wheat, which are recommended for the spring grains. Proteins, again, look at how wonderfully light they all happen to be. I want to move myself here. You've got eggs, chicken, white fish, rabbit, as well as shrimp. These are lighter, whiter, calming foods that you can have. So they're not that heavy or greasy or red meats that you would have more towards the winter when you're really trying to solidify it. This is again about qi promotion and growth. The herbs we're looking at is goji. An important one is the aged orange peel, which allows to continue with that circulation or the qi movement. Chrysanthemum, which is excellent for any eye issues, allergies, anxiety that might come from that settling, the starting of the movement. Ginger, we know, is very pungent and moving. And then cilantro is really one of the best detoxifying herbs that are out there. It's really important to move that. So you say, okay, this looks really great, but what should I be worried about? What am I looking to avoid? Foods to avoid are the ones you would think about. Fried foods, which cause damp, which is going to pull everything in. Sour foods, which congeal everything, again, pulling it all in. We want that upward movement, so we're trying not to pull it in. Cold foods and frozen foods are also, again, along that cold line, which will start to solidify everything to pull it in. And so, again, thinking of keeping things moving, keeping things fresh. So what is the effects of spring qi? One of the things is, as we look at the season before, we are always preparing for the next season. So our time for spring actually starts in the winter. So when we don't prepare ourselves for the spring or appropriately nourish ourselves in the winter, we're going to start to lead to these injuries within the spring. And one of them is kidney wilting and reversal, or the insufficiency to supply for life. And so that's why oftentimes people will come out of the winter and they'll feel very depleted, very exhausted. You may hear them say, I don't have the energy to create. I don't have the energy to move forward. I don't have the energy to do the things I usually would do in the spring. The other thing to look at is when people are harmed in the winter by cold, especially if they live in a cold climate, come springtime, they're going to start to develop some of these warm diseases. You're going to see the Wenbing action. And so when you're not eating, say maybe you ate a ton of ice cream in the middle of winter, and so you have this harming of the cold in the cold, it can actually cause issues in the spring, and this can bring about the gastrointestinal issues, such as diarrhea, cramping, nausea, all of that type of thing. Because spring belongs to the liver, and it has that expansion and growth, new experiences and offshoots, and so this is when people start to overdo it themselves. The chi is just coming to the surface, which can cause this unbalanced heat, causing dry throats, yellow urine, diarrhea, constipation, and also bad breath, which is what I was saying is why we're looking towards some of those fruits to help support these, support the spleens and as well as support the lungs with the pears. So as we know, spring moves on over into summer and brings with it another group of things. And so you want to focus on the spring foods to prepare yourself for when we all pivot into summer. But a great example of a spring meal I have here is a picture of some white fish with green vegetables. You can see here, there's some really good fish. It does not have a heavy sauce on it. It looks like it could be lemon, some capers, which is a little pungent there, and some really great green vegetables as well as your asparagus. So next thing happens is we fall on into summer. And what does summer bring us? Summer chi is about heat and dryness. We can imagine that hot summer. Some of us live in climates where it's more humid, but it's still a drier experience because as in the spring, we want to make sure that there's rain and the soil is wet and that is conducive to growth within the plants. Well, in the summer, plants need to start to dry off and so that they can begin to ripen and to be able to produce their vegetables or their fruits for our harvest. And so you really start to feel this high heat in the early part of the summer that segues more into a lighter heat, but still heat in the later summer. The summer is all about bringing fruits and grains and vegetables to harvest time, which will happen in the fall, which Dr. K will talk about. But you have the ripening, and that's the experience of summer chi. The organs that hang out for summer chi is the heart in the beginning, which is that high heat and fire, and then also the earth in the later summer where it pivots to the spleen and stomach. And so what tastes do we look at? We want to have a little bit more of a bitter taste with it. And why do we want bitter? Bitter has an action of drying the damp and dispersing obstructions. So as we accumulate this heat, it has a little bit of heat clearing. It can drain excess. So as people get a little wound up, we get too much excess of emotion, the bitter can go ahead and start to drain that out as well. We want it mildly sour because in the summer, we tend to sweat and we want to start to consolidate some of this sweat in. We don't want to over sweat, which can cause problems of depletion coming into the fall and winter. So we do want to contain a little bit. And obviously slightly sweet because we're looking at a little bit of time where there might not be as much food or not as much fresh food back in the day, right? So after we do harvest, we're coming into more of that introverted time of we harvest in the fall and then we come into this introverted time in the winter. So we want to start to really make sure that our spleen stomach in the later summer is really nourished to go into that. We're looking at light soups because they are very nourishing and they're also hydrating. We want to protect against this dryness over here because we want to make sure that we have a deep moisture moving into the summers. We're also looking at bright colors. Bright colors are going to really nourish us. and calming and cooling foods. Summer is a time of high heat, which can raise emotions and cause a lot of distress with people, a lot of hyperactivity in the mind. And so you want to really make sure that you're bringing that calming down. And it wants to be hydrating and nourishing as well. So what foods do we like to enjoy? If you look at this, you can start to see some really great themes. In the fruits, we've got melons and strawberries and berries and cherries, plums, peaches, elderberries, and apples. The first thing that stands out with that is you're like, oh, there's the melons and the plums and peaches and strawberries. They're all very juicy and full of hydration, as well as all the phytonutrients that are going to really support what's going on. And so it's important to bring those options of moisture into your body in other ways than just water. Also, like with the strawberries and berries and cherries, and this section down here, they're very colorful, and that gives you that bright color that you need, again, with all the phytonutrients to be able to move into the fall where you might not have those experiences as much. When we look at our vegetables, with the cucumbers and endives, again, that's a little bit of a pushback when we're saying, oh, okay, we need to have these cooling foods that come in. And the lettuces, they're light, they're cooling, they're going to help process the heat. But as we start to, in dandelion, which is so detoxifying and wonderful, but as we start to move to the later summer, you can notice here we've got sweet potatoes, we've got eggplants, corn, and squash. These are more of the earth-feeling types of foods. If you look at it, corn is yellow, sweet potato reminds you you're pulling it up out of the ground. And so we're already starting to do that pivot towards the fall where we're doing more of the harvesting and nourishing. And that the late summer pulls over into the earth element, which these speak to a lot more. Then we come into protein. Again, we're still saying, hey, it should be pretty light during the summer. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to eat heavy, greasy meats. We want to keep things light because we're also more active. And so with protein, you're looking at some plant-based foods, your lighter meats, soy, yogurt, as well as salmon. Salmon bringing in those omega-3s that you probably are going to need when we pivot into darker hours in the winter. The herbs, we're still looking at our chrysanthemum, which is our jute-bok, to help with eyes and ears and nose. Lily bulb, longan, which is really high, really nourishing. Still keeping in our aged tangerine peel so that we can make sure that we keep things moving. Honeysuckle is excellent for cardiac issues as well as draining damp. It's also very, very good for anxiety and depression. And so we can start to see some anxiety just because there's heat, just because our chi is moving up a little bit more. People may want to have some honeysuckle. And mint, we know, is always very cooling and cuts through a lot of phlegm in the orifices and all of that. And then saffron. So after we have that great list, what should we avoid? What's going to set us up for not success in the next month, in the next season, excuse me. Well, the first thing we'll see is alcohol, which a lot of times we're like, oh, but there's a lot of really fun parties in the summer. But we want to avoid alcohol because alcohol can really start to cause that damp. And that damp is going to weigh us down, and it's not going to allow us to really move and sweat as how we should. The next one here is really interesting. Coffee is actually good as a bitter drainer. Black coffee can be really good, especially if someone's going through a heartache or a heartbreak where just holding a lot of emotional chi in the heart or in the pericardium. Coffee can drain that out, but once we make it iced coffee, which is one of my favorites and super delicious in the summer, it really starts to, again, it's probably got dairy. We're going to create that damp, cold consolidates things. And so we're not going to get the movement or that lightness that we need for the summer. Same things for the next two, which is a dairy-based ice cream. Dairy and cold really starts to congeal things down. That's when you start to get some of those summer colds and some of those constipation or diarrhea, gastrointestinal issues. And again, we go back to the fried foods, which are great at fairs, but can be really detrimental to our health moving forward and into the fall. So what is the effects of summer chi? Well, as you guys know, summer is when everybody gets out and does things. They run races, they go camping, they go hang with friends, they're really active. And so when we start to bring in foods that slow things down, such as greasy foods, raw frozen foods, this can damage that spleen chi, especially when we're looking at the later summer, which is all related to the earth. That's when we should be nourishing the earth so that it's ready to go into this winter of hibernation. But if we're eating our cold frozen foods, which how great is ice cream on a really hot summer's day, right? Like that's something we really enjoy. Once in a while, it's okay, but if we overeat with that, it's going to cause diarrhea and stomach upset and poor appetite. Summer is the time when we should be taking advantage of all the fresh fruits and vegetables that are becoming ripe and ready for harvest so that we can build up the chi with what's local, with what's regional, and what is also in season at that time, what is seasonal. So local, cultural, local, regional, and seasonal is what we're looking at. Can we get close to us? What can we get that's in our region and what's in season? Which again, if you think we are really a global society. So here I'm in the great state of Washington in the United States. I can get grapes in the middle of winter because they were imported from somewhere. They're very delicious. But is that the right thing that I should be eating in the middle of winter? Probably not, because it's going to counter the effects of my summer chi. So the earth is always creating what we need at that time. And so keep in mind, during summer, we want to build up this chi because we're getting ready to pivot over into the winter, which Dr. K is going to talk about. But we're getting ready to pivot over into the winter, which is going to be this introspective time. And in traditional times, food might not have been as readily available and maybe not the fresh vegetables that we have. So what would be a delicious meal for summer? An example of a great summer meal, sorry y'all. An example of a great summer meal would be this, it's a cooling and calming cucumber soup. And why is this great? One, it's gonna be a cool, light soup. So there's no heat to it. It's nice and cool. It's got good chunks of cucumber. So I would put this one more at the beginning of summer when people might be overexcited with what's going on. And then it's got a little bit of drizzle of olive oil, it looks like, in there, as well as some of the herbs, which will keep everything moving. And so we have that movement with the herbs in there as well. And so this is how we start to begin to bolster our bodies so that we are prepared for that next season. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. K. And thank you so much for inviting me to join your symposium.
Moving on to fall season. The fall is in contracting time of the year. The energy is moving inward. The corresponding organs are lung and large intestine. The associated taste is pungent, and the color is white, as we can see in radish, pear, and bellflower root. During the summer, people tend to eat more salads and raw foods. Now the season is shifting to fall. We need to shift to more soups and stews. These are easier to digest, and their watery nature helps to nourish the yin element. Eating warm, cooked vegetables of the season, like sweet potatoes, squash, beets, broccoli, will help your body adjust to the change. Apples and pears nourish and moisten lung yin, a delicious medicine for dry cough. I have the recipe to share using the pear and honey. The pungent food like onion, garlic, turnip, ginger, horseradish will help to build defensive qi and disperse mucus. Drink warm water or tea with your meals and throughout the day to warm your body and nourish the yin. As fall is the season to moisten and nourish your body fluids, avoid the excessive intake of cold drinks and summer fruits, especially melons. Cold food slows the digestive process and causes the wind. In fall, There should be far fewer salads and more soups. The effect of a fall qi, the weather association, is dryness and coldness begins to increase. It is about art of letting go for new energy, new health, and new experiences. It is a great time for organizing, setting boundaries, finishing a project, and reflect. We may experience grief, sadness, sorrow, and lose enthusiasm for life when lung and large intestine are out of balance. I have some examples of a fall food. It's one of my favorite recipe using rice and radish. Very simple and to prepare, but a great health benefit. The radish is so light, it's low in calories. It only has like a 13 gram a calorie per 100 gram, and it has a lots of vitamins, minerals, and high in fiber. And I often recommend this to whoever wants to lose weight, but they don't want to starve. As a rice and radish gives you the fullness, the sense of a fullness, and you don't have to snack on any other stuff. So the ingredients are very simple. We're using rice, water, and radish. Can add a mushroom as well. And on the side, we want to make a sauce using chopped green onion, soy sauce, sesame oil, sesame seeds, a little bit of water, and a little bit of chili pepper to give it a little kick, which is optional. You put the rice in a rice cooker, then add water, cover them with the radish and mushrooms. You will cook as you cook white rice. And once it's done, you can add 1 to 2 tablespoons of a sauce, drizzle 1 teaspoon of a sesame oil, mix all up and enjoy. Here I have another great fall recipe, which is a steamed pear with the honey. You can simply use a pear and honey only, but I like to use ginger, cinnamon, and date to further increase the the boost the immune system as well. And here I use Asian pear because it's crispier, juicier, a lot sweeter than other type of a pear. But if you can find Asian pear, other type of pear is fine too. And I use a honey, but some people like to use a rock sugar, cane sugar, or brown sugar. It's all up to you. You're gonna start by cleaning the pear and make a lid by slicing the 1 inch off the top of the pear. Scoop out the core and the seeds with a small spoon. You fill it up with honey, ginger, cinnamon, and date slices. Put the sliced lid back on the pear and put it in a heat resistance bowl. Steam the pear about 1 hour over medium-high heat. You can serve that either cool, hot, or cold temperature. And this recipe is commonly used by a lot of teachers like us. We always talk, and professional singers in my culture, South Korea. And because it's great for nourishing in, boost your immune system, and protect you from catching a cold. And it's great for moistening your throat as well. So I highly recommend to try it if you start feeling like you're coming down during this time of the year. And we now have a winter season, which is highest in time of the year. The energy is moving inward and downward. It corresponds to the kidney and bladder. Associated taste is salty in like kelp and other seaweeds, you could tell. And the color is black or dark blue, dark black purple-ish color in black sesame, black beans, blueberries, blackberries. So winter is a time to recharge and reflect. And to nourish during this time, we want to use a lot of warming foods. The type of food we want to enjoy during this time include nuts, especially walnuts, very good for kidney. Seeds like sesame, black sesame is very good for kidney as well. Legumes, shellfish, saltwater fish, seaweed, dark colored berries like blackberries and blueberries, root vegetables, whole grains, stews and soups. So mostly we want to use warm and cooked food to restore yang. To further boost the yang, we want to use warming spices like garlic, ginger, and cinnamon. We want to make sure we avoid the cold and raw foods during this time and say no to icy drinks and ice cream. And too much caffeine also depletes the kidney, so we want to use it in moderation. Winter is an opportunity to focus on the health and spirit of the kidneys and urinary bladder, restore their resources, and better manage our reserves. We definitely want to slow down, get plenty of rest, eat well in season, drink lots of fluid, and adopt a restorative wellness routine, which will support these organ systems and boost their vitality. The weather being cold during this time, we definitely want to conserve and also not overdo too much. Again, it's a time for restoring and recharging. We may experience a fear, lack of motivation from cold, and stagnation caused by cold when kidney and bladder are out of balance. Examples of a winter food to support the yang and support the immune system during this cold season. I have a chicken soup with the chives recipe, and on the side we have a black sesame sea salt dipping sauce. You could use a whole chicken or a chicken breast or different part of a chicken meat. That is fine. Water, and adding ginger, cloves, chives, all to boost the yang energy. To further boost the immune, we can add mushrooms. And the sauce making, I use black sesame seeds, sea salt, black pepper, and a little bit of a sesame oil, and optional chili pepper to give it a little kick. So you want to put chicken, ginger, garlic, and mushroom in a pot and boil. Once chickens are fully cooked and soft, turn off the heat. Serve with the chives on top in a bowl. Add sesame salt in the soup to taste, or use the sauce for dipping. If you want to use a chicken meat, the little piece by piece, it could be very addicting. So next one, this is my the most favorite winter food, which is a ginger cinnamon tea. It's simple but very powerful. Using the ingredient of organic ginger root and cinnamon bark with the water, and you can use either brown sugar or honey, and pine nuts and sliced date for garnish, which is optional. You want to clean and slice the ginger root. Boil the ginger root in the water for 15 minutes in a high heat. Clean the cinnamon bark and add into the ginger tea for extra 10 minutes. You boil together. Strain and add brown sugar or honey. This can be served hot or cold for energy boost, digestion, and immune strength. So here's the key. When we talk about the Qi Wei, the TCM energetic properties of a food, because the ginger and cinnamon, they both are very warm and then hot. Even though we serve in cold temperature, this is not going to damage or deplete our yang. So understanding the properties of each food, the nature, the flavor, the energy, it's really, really helpful. So we are reviewing the eating with the seasons in terms of achieving the health and vitality by eating in harmony with the nature. Depending on the food preparations, each food can be enhanced, and then the properties and flavor can change. So during this lecture, I share the recipe using radish and then a pear, and when we consume raw radish or raw pear, the texture is different. It's crispier and juicier, and the radish can be pungent, has a little bit of a acrid and spicy flavor. But when it's cooked, it actually turns it into more of a soothing, sweet flavor, which is more of nourishing in property. So the property and flavor changed. Same thing with the pear too. So understanding the each individual energetic properties, and then also learning how we can enhance through the different type of a preparation is very useful. TCM nutrition is not about restriction or elimination. It is very flexible, that allows us to consume most of the things with the moderation, but encourages us to consume more of a certain food during a certain seasons to address the imbalances and to limit certain foods that likely contribute to our disharmonies. So we definitely have a flexibility. Therefore, you don't need to just eat Chinese food to start TCM food therapy. As long as we understand the principles, it is very easy to apply for all the cuisines all over the world. So learning about the food dynamics and then the properties in eating with the seasons. Why is that so important? It's because implementing TCM nutrition enhances your TCM practice and helps your patients learn about their body and being aware of emotional and energetic changes. And we also talk about the sustainability of eating with the seasons. The small sustainable change can make a huge difference in our health, in our community, and also in our planet as well. It has been my absolute pleasure to share what we do and what I know. And special thanks to Dr. Phil for this wonderful opportunity. And I hope you have a great health and have a wonderful day. Thank you.